Getting a feel for the mood inside One Buc Place, that and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs. He is Rock Riley at Real Rock Riley. And we are your credentialed members of the media covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this show is here with you every Monday through Friday, along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. Rock, it is great to have you back on the show. You and I were doing a show there together for a little while. Excited to have you on here. Of course, everyone, you can catch what Rock's doing. The Rock Stops Here podcast, all over Twitter, on WDAE, including Saturday. What was it? You got a time change for Saturday when you're going to be on DAE, right?
Yeah, on Saturday. This Saturday, it's going to be at 5:00 because they have all day coverage from Ray's Fan Fest. But normally it's 1 to 2 o'clock. But follow me at Real Rock Riley and you'll always know. But no, really happy. I started at WDA when they first went on the air, the first voice, and it's all these years later, and I'm happy to be back there too.
All right. Well, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. We are going to hear about what went down Super Bowl week and what we might expect when the new league year begins coming up in a little bit. But Rock, I want to know about some things that have already gone down so far. And let's start with the craziness that transpired with Liam Coen and how that entire situation played out. Lots of upset fans as Coen withdrew from consideration with Jacksonville. Then he ghosts the Bucs the day that that's announced. Into the next day, he ends up being in Jacksonville. He takes the job. As someone inside the building, what was kind of the general mood there at One Buc when all this Coen stuff went down?
The sources in the building, they were very, they were ticked off. And probably the most ticked off that they had ever been for any one of these transactions or somebody taking a position that's higher, a head coaching gig. Normally, you say, you know what, you did a great job, but you know what, I had to make it through like that. I wish you well. This was different. It was almost like being jilted by an ex. You know what I mean? Because they made him the highest paid offensive coordinator in the NFL. Doing that, from what I understand, it was Jason Light way before this all happened during this season. At the end of the season, went to him and said, we like you. Baker likes you. We know you might get offers. This offense is humming. What will it take? He gave them a number. Jason Light goes back to the owners, the Glazers. They said, boom, do it. He goes back to them. Boom. Supposed to sign the contract next day. Don't hear from him. He also asked for more money. Then the Glazer, he did meet with Joel Glazer, Liam Coen, and he told him he had this interview in Jacksonville. And Joel Glazer, from what I was told, said, you know what? Go experience it. It's a good experience to get the interview. But again, we want you here. We're glad if you're going to accept our offer. So they didn't mind that. But the general manager, Trent Baalke, was there. And I spoke to a lot of people on Radio Row this week. Like, a lot of people just did not like him. That seemed to be one of the cases. Like, get rid of him. It hasn't worked. And Shad Khan, the owner, stepped in. And boy, Liam Coen is a good talker. He's a very good interviewer. And it became evident with their quarterback, what they had. They want to build around the offense. He's their guy. So Shad Khan said, forget about the agents. I'm going to deal directly with you. Come back here. I'm going to fire Baalke, and I'm going to give you a lot of input in hiring who you want as GM. So here you go. Quadruple your salary, get a head coaching gig, and you can pick your general manager for a first-time guy. That never happens. So, but when you come back here, we want to fly you back here, but don't tell the Buccaneers. So a lot of it, the people that I talked to in the NFL were like putting a lot of this on Shad Khan and the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know Liam Coen, it just didn't feel right. But what would you do in your job if you got an opportunity to quadruple your salary and that next boss tells you, come here for this interview? You're not taking a sick day. Don't tell them back there. What do you do? What would you really do? Would you tell your current employer, or no, I got this opportunity? So he didn't say anything. Then they were calling and texting and he wasn't responding within 24 hours. So then he did contact Baker Mayfield. They were on a boat. He was on a boat with the offensive lineman. They were on a trip. I believe it was in the Bahamas, because a lot of people, it's like, oh, Mike Evans said he found out on Instagram. Is he lying? No, Mike Evans is not a partier, doesn't drink beer, doesn't like fishing. He's a gamer. So he wasn't on that trip. And I don't know for sure, but I talked to Baker Mayfield at the Pro Bowl, one-on-one. I talked to Mike Evans, and Baker said, you know what? For him and his family, we don't have any hard feelings. You got a head coaching job in Jacksonville. Now it's on to Josh Grizzard. But I don't know if that was actually the case when they first got that news. Like, you know what I'm saying? So there you go. He goes to Jacksonville, and then the Buccaneers were looking for a new offensive coordinator.
Well, and let's go ahead and shift over to Josh Grizzard, the new offensive coordinator. And you've had some time to talk to folks. You just mentioned it. You talked to Baker and Mike at the Pro Bowl. But you've talked to people about this move. And it seems as though the players are excited about this promotion. People inside the building are excited about this promotion. What do you feel that the Bucs are getting in Grizzard this season as the new play caller and offensive coordinator?
The biggest thing was not having to, they're going to tweak. You always got to tweak. You got to try to do better. You can't do the same thing, because look at what the opposing defensive coordinators, they know what the Buccaneers are going to do. So you got to tweak, but they weren't going to start from scratch. They're too far along. Mike Evans was kidding around. And I said, what about Josh? He's like, oh, me and him are cool if he gets me the ball more. And then he just started laughing. Oh, that's fine. That's a wide receiver. But no, Baker told me that in the meetings when he was in there with Josh Grizzard, he was so well prepared. He's an Ivy League guy. And Baker also told me, he's like, what I like is he's been in a couple of different systems. He's been in situations where they've blown out people and they always keep him, especially in Miami. So that says something about the guy. Mike Evans goes, man, when we went into the third down, because he was in charge of third downs, even though he's called passing game coordinator, he was in charge of third downs. They were number one in the league in third downs. And Evans goes, he had everything. We knew what we were doing. That's why it wasn't a fluke. So that's the thing. Continuity. Thing is, though, he hasn't called plays ever before. That's going to be a learning curve. And I asked that to Baker. And Baker goes, you know what? I'm used to it. Had to go through this with Dave. But what I did like is what Todd Bowles said. In training camp, even they're going to start mini camp and OTAs. They're going to start doing these live calls where he is going to be calling right into the headset. They did this with Canales to start getting used to Baker hearing him hearing Baker, and pretending it's like more like game situations in this offseason. So it won't be that much of a big learning curve once they get to games when they start playing for real.
All right. Well, we are going to take a trip back to New Orleans. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking up a player to hit a clutch three, I never feel like I've missed my chance. Plus, the app is really easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. The Boston Celtics are the favorites to win the NBA Finals at plus 195, followed by the Oklahoma City Thunder at plus 230, and then the Cleveland Cavaliers at plus 850. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. The new Locked On NFL is here, and it's 2 shows every day. First, you got the Madman Tyler Rowland kicking off your morning. Then you can stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts. You get unprecedented NFL inside hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make it your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Lots of stories and news coming out of New Orleans last week leading up to the Super Bowl. Radio Row was buzzing. You were there. You were doing your thing. Our network, we had David Harrison. We had Ross Jackson. We had some guys out there doing their thing. David even joked on the NFL squad show that we do that Myles Garrett walked right by him and he said, "Hey, Myles, if you want to play for the Washington Commanders, ignore me." And Myles kept walking and he goes, "Okay, well, Myles Garrett to the Commanders confirmed." But what was the buzz about Tampa and what kind of things were you hearing when it came to the Bucs throughout last week there on Radio Row?
Everybody, when I told them I'm from Tampa Bay and I cover the Bucs, they all wanted to talk about Baker Mayfield. And it's so funny on how many, James, I knew he was going to be good. I knew Cleveland made a mistake. Boy, I wish the Browns had him again. Everybody was saying that. But no, I did have a nice long conversation with Chris Sims. He was there with Pro Football Talk, former Buccaneer quarterback, and just raving about the Bucs offense. And he thinks, like, watching and seeing that offensive line, he's like, that's a top 5 offensive line. Graham Barton, how well he played as a rookie. The running attack, everybody loves Bucky Irving. And then I asked him about Mike Evans, and he goes, "You know what? I was one of the guys that was singing his praises when he came out of Texas A&M. It was all Johnny Manziel. Show me the money. Johnny Manziel. No, it wasn't Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel was helped by Mike Evans." And he said he is definitely a Hall of Famer, didn't slow down. And let's see if they can try to get Chris Godwin back. But he was raving about the Buccaneer offense. Now, and most of the people did. A lot of people were not really talking about the Liam Coen situation because if you're not really heavily involved in it, it's like, oh, that's kind of strange. But, he's now with Trevor Lawrence. He's a young offensive guy. See if he can get it done with the Jaguars. That's the consensus. But when I asked Chris Sims, what did you think about how it went down with Liam Coen? And he goes, it was odd. And I put a lot of the blame with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So that was really it. Tristan Wirfs was making the rounds. He was being asked about, obviously, Baker, switching positions, and also the biggest difference between Baker and the GOAT. And he's like, man, when I came in, I was a rookie. And here I got to protect the GOAT. And I had so much respect for Tom, but also I couldn't hang with Tom. I was 22 years old. He was 45 years old. Baker comes in. You want to get a beer? Boom. You want to go to a dive bar? Boom. You want to go out fishing? Boom. You want to see the lightning? Boom. So, I mean, it's interesting. It's nothing against Tom, but a 45-year-old, 22-year-old, or 43-year-old, you know what I mean? I was kind of surprised that Rachaad White on Radio Row said that Baker is the best quarterback that he's ever played for. And that's what did Brady there. But he also did say that the big thing that he took from Tom Brady is Rachaad White, the year that he was going through the divorce with Giselle, and he's a young guy in the league, and he was seeing, you could see Brady, his cheeks were sunken in. He was losing weight. He's got kids. When you're going through a divorce with kids, even if you're a billionaire, man, and you're a good person, it's going to affect you. And he said he saw how he's still prepared. He still got the job done. And that's what he's seeing as he moves on in life. Like, things are going to crop up, but when you're a pro, man, you still got to go and do your job. So it was interesting with the national perspective of the Buccaneers. They love the offense and they all love Baker Mayfield.
Yeah. And as Rachaad said, you're mentioning what Rachaad said about Baker being the best quarterback. I started thinking, I was like, well, his rookie year, that Tom wasn't the Tom in 2020 or 2021. That was a different Tom that he got to play with. And it wasn't a great year for him, obviously with the personal stuff, but then just the season in general. The Bucs finished 8-9. Byron Leftwich had a terrible year as offensive coordinator. So I could see how, Baker in Rashad's career has been the better of the two quarterbacks. So, I mean, I guess that does make a little bit of sense there, but lots of other big news around the NFL on Radio Row. And of course, Myles Garrett was the big one that everyone was talking about. There's been a lot of talk amongst Bucs media, Bucs fans, Bucs Twitter that, the Bucs should make a move for Myles Garrett. I've talked about it on this show. Talked about the Bucs making a move for Trey Hendrickson. I know Pewter Report just did a mock draft where they mocked trading for Trey Hendrickson. I did one where I mocked trading for Myles Garrett. When you take a look at the Bucs and kind of being around these guys, talking to people inside the building, do you feel like the Bucs are going to be buyers in the trade market when the new league year opens? I mean, is it a pipe dream for people to sit here and talk about Myles Garrett or Trey Hendrickson being on the Buccaneers? Or is this something that, Jason Lights only pulled the trigger on something like this once for Jason Pierre-Paul? Could we see that again with the way that this team is constructed now?
Normally, I would say no. He really values draft picks so much. He and his staff have an eye on the future as well as the present. But in this case, I know for a fact that ownership believes that Baker Mayfield is your franchise quarterback. They got him. It's so hard to get that. It starts there, and they got him. And they got the offensive line. And Bucky Irving, they got a running attack. So they've got it. And they got Evans. McMillan they like. They'll probably get another receiver. I'm hearing that they really do. They don't believe that the dislocated ankle with Chris Godwin is as hard of a comeback as the ACL and the sprained MCL. So they really would like him back. He was really good in the slot, as we know, but he's going to turn 29. So they really like the offense. You got it. You got it. You need an edge. You need an edge. Yes, you need a corner. Yes, you're going to need inside linebackers. So my thing is, James, this is one of those cases where I believe, remember when they got the GOAT, they went all in. They got Gronk. They got Antonio Brown. They pay we'll go all in. And I think that they're at that point. But I also don't think that they would give away the farm or the future. Like if it's two number ones and a number two and a player for Myles Garrett, that to me is a little too steep. That's just me. I could see them going with an edge, maybe the kid Green from Marshall. Maybe you also make a move for maybe a Trey Hendrickson, something like that. So I think that they think that they are close. I really do. And I could see them making a move or two this offseason.
All right. Well, we are going to talk more about that offseason as free agency is set to kick off in less than a month. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Football season may be over, but basketball is in full swing, and there's no better way to stay in the game than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. The best part, Prize Picks is quick and easy. You can set your lineup in less than 60 seconds, and their fast and secure withdrawals mean that I get my winnings in as little as 15 minutes. Plus, I love their weekly promos like Taco Tuesday, where you get discounted player projections for even better value. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL, all lowercase, all one word, and you're going to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Wrapping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. And Rock, of course, free agency starting up next month. We are less than 4 weeks away now. All eyes on Chris Godwin and whether or not he's going to stay. You just mentioned it, that the Bucs don't feel like the dislocated ankle is nearly as bad as the ACL tear, the MCL sprain. I was just talking about that on the squad show. I was talking about it on yesterday's show that, these injuries for Chris Godwin, they suck. Like, there's no other way to put it. It sucks. He suffered 2 catastrophic leg injuries, but there's a big difference between that ACL tear and then that dislocated ankle, because we're not talking about all the ligament damage and all the recovery that comes with it. I'm watching my son go through the same thing with his ACL recovery, having to build back all that muscle, having to build back, the strength in those tendons. It took him, a year to get back and then another year to become himself again. So I've actually become more confident, as the days go by, that Chris Godwin is not going anywhere, that he's going to be a Buck. But what are you hearing about Chris Godwin and his future?
I'm hearing the same thing. And when he first went down, I thought, you know what? Again, remember he said, well, got to start from scratch. Like, got to do it again. Got to do the rehab. And you fell for him. And I'm like, wow, later in your career again. And he's going to, he wants to get this is going to be the last big payday. He's already made so much. The other thing is, he's from that Washington, D.C. area. So is his wife. The Commanders would love to have him for their young stud quarterback. But he loves the Buccaneers organization. He loves playing with Mike. He loves being in the slot. He loves Baker. So, and I know that they love him. Everybody loves him. He's one of the most stand-up guys that I've ever covered. And he's a great worker, and the younger receivers see what he does and Evans does. I think that really helped Jalen McMillan. That's what Jalen McMillan told me. He goes, I watch Mike, I watch Chris, I watch how they prepare, and I got to start preparing better. And then it was like he was doing good in practice, and those guys told him, Godwin even texted him after he had one of his good games, and he goes, I got a text from Chris Godwin, and it's, how do I translate what I do in practice? But I got to make sure I do that in the game. So he's just so valuable. And I know that they want him and management wants him. I'm hoping that they do get it done. But I'm like you. I'm a lot more confident now than I was 6, 7, 8 weeks ago.
Yeah, well, and I know, again, shout out to David. He and I argued on the squad show because he referred to Chris Godwin as future Commanders receiver, Chris Godwin. And then he got upset with me when I brought up the Bucs signing Bobby Wagner. I don't understand why. All right, so the Bucs have upgrades that they need to make on the defensive side of the ball. It's not that they want to, they have to. If you're going to compete in the NFC with the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, if you're going to compete with the Detroit Lions, if you're going to compete with the Washington Commanders, you have to upgrade some positions on the defensive side of the ball. I've talked a lot about how I think Jamel Dean is not going to be with the team. There's starting to be some buzz that maybe Jordan Whitehead is not going to be part of the team next season, but you're looking at edge rusher, you're looking at corner, at least one, probably more than one corner. You need somebody next to Levante David. If Levante comes back, if not, you need 2 inside linebackers. Do you get the sense that the Bucs are going to be really active with some of these bigger name free agents? Maybe not like the super money, but some of these bigger name free agents, or are these going to be positions that we're going to have to wait until April and watch the Bucs, address these needs in the draft? I don't expect them to be spending, hundreds of millions of dollars, but at the same time, they're not going to be bargain shopping either, right?
No, they're not. And they don't have a lot of money to play with. Now, the good thing is Mike Greenberg, for your fans, he's capologist. He's way more than capologist. So far, he's still here. That's huge. So if anybody can get the most out of what they have with the salary cap, deferring contracts, restructuring. I'm expecting Baker Mayfield to restructure his contract. He wants to help. That's probably going to happen this offseason. I don't see them being big spenders. I think there's something like 28, I think, with available cap space. So they're down there. They're not the Saints. They're not at the bottom. They don't have a lot to play with, something like $5 million right now at this point, but they'll have a couple of restructures. Inside linebacker, they really need, James. Look, if Levante doesn't come back, they're not going to bring KJ Britt back. JJ Russell will probably not be back. So you're looking at like Jose Ramirez, who we still don't know. He could be something that he turns into, but we still don't know. So I hope Levante comes back for one more year. Didn't he lead? I think didn't he lead in tackles, James? I believe he led in tackles this year. So I was waiting for Father Time to catch up. Really didn't. I thought it was at one point with pass coverage, but so you need him. And you're right. Jamel Dean, what's that going to be? $12.5 million. Too much for him. So I think heavily in the draft and maybe one or two free agents, but they really don't want to go older. I've had people say, well, if you're in the run and you want to make the run this year, then you go all out 1 year this year. Well, you don't want to get somebody in their 30s. Look, the knock on them going into this last season was they were too old. They were a little slow. They wanted to get younger, faster, and they did. It is a young man's game. So you got to be careful for paying for a name on what they have done. But it's tough because they need help badly on defense. The offense is going to be good, and you want to make that run. You're right, and it can be done. A lot of big decisions got to be made. We all know that.
Yeah, even though they want to get younger, I would still love just for 1 year to see Levante David and Bobby Wagner lined up side by side. That'd be so much fun. All right, Rock, let everybody know where they can catch everything that you are doing, the podcast, the radio, all of your written stuff, everything.
Yeah, everywhere. Probably the easiest way at Real Rock Riley on X, on Instagram, or on Facebook, Rock Riley. That would be the best way. Tampa Free Press, Sports Reporter, the Rock Stops Here podcast, wherever you get your podcast. Now WDAE Saturdays, also main fill-in, doing a lot more shows and anything else that happens. And the Locked On podcast with the great James Yarcho. Once I see your text, I'm like, I'm in.
Love that. Rock, I appreciate you so much, brother. I love having you on here. We're going to have to do it a lot more as we get into free agencies, we get into the draft. We're going to have a lot of fun this year. All right, that is going to do it for this episode. Please check out everything on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JRCO_Bucs, at Real Rock Riley. Make sure that you are following along on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining us right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.